Watch this.
So, enrollment is sliding in Treasure Valley schools, huh? Not in Canyon County, and now the Valivue School District is cashing in on the generosity of taxpayers. But this solution could be short-lived. From funding cuts to all bills big and beautiful, there's been a lot going on in D.C. lately, which is why we've sent Joe Paris to our nation's capital to get some perspective from Idaho's delegation. A stone's throw from Idaho stands what was once the tallest such structure in the country. The Owyhee Dam lost that title and the attention because of what it proved was possible. For the last decade or so, school districts across the Treasure Valley have shown a decrease in enrollment numbers, from Boise and West Ada to Nampa and Caldwell. But the school district crammed in between those last two districts has had the opposite problem, trying to cram too many students into schools built for far fewer. Canyon County's Valivue School District has actually seen an increase in students, and it's also bucked the trend when it comes to getting taxpayers to agree to increase their property taxes. They've been successful, which is why this fall they're seeing the culmination of those two things by opening 2 new elementary schools to try to relieve some of the pressure of overcrowding. But this could be just a temporary fix, as Aspen Shumpert found out, as district leaders worry that pressure could rebuild in just a few years.
The growth over the last few years has taken its toll on our classroom sizes with our student-to-teacher ratios.
Caught between the growing cities of Nampa and Caldwell sits the Valivue School District.
We're just having to do a whole lot of shifting.
Valivue Assistant Superintendent Joey Palmer says as farmland continues to be converted into developments, the district's enrollment keeps climbing.
When you love your community, you want to take care of your community, but it's also difficult whenever it seems like the growth doesn't have any end in sight.
Back in 2023, the school district turned to voters, passing nearly a $80 million bond to build 2 new elementary schools. 2 years later, both schools are set to open fall of 2024, Warhawk Elementary School and Falcon Ridge Elementary School.
We're absolutely thrilled and grateful that we have 2 schools coming online to help alleviate a lot of the stress that comes in a classroom full of students and not a whole lot of manpower teaching-wise.
Palmer says having the 2 schools will help alleviate some of the overcrowding at the other elementary schools in the district.
Those schools were built for around 700 students per building, and those were both pushing 900 students on average.
But Palmer says this will only solve the problem temporarily.
Skyway Elementary, which was brand new in 2016-17, we were thrilled that we were able to build that school and alleviate the overcrowding at that time. But guess what? Skyway Elementary is overcrowded. So we're repeating history all over again, where we're building 2 elementary schools, and then we're going to say, at least we're sitting pretty for now.
He worries if growth continues, voters may not support funding the construction of more schools.
Voters are feeling the burnout. Although we got 72% voter approval to build these 2 schools, we also receive a lot of feedback at the district office saying, hey, how come developers aren't paying their fair share?
He says a better long-term solution may lie in the hands of Idaho lawmakers.
Take a look at adding school districts as entities that could take impact fees from developers, just like they do in all the other states.
Or local government stepping in, like the Middleton City Council, who passed an ordinance in 2024 prohibiting developments that would put schools over a certain level of capacity.
If they did something, it doesn't have to be exactly what Middleton's doing, but if they did think creatively outside of the box, short of legislation saying, hey, impact fees need to be a thing for school districts, for developers to pay, it would be great if they came together and put their heads together and tried to find a way.
Again, those 2 elementary schools are set to open this fall. Additionally, the school district is looking at options to further alleviate overcrowding at Ridgeview High School, which was built for 1,800 students just last year. Palmer says it reached 1,700. And if more developments move into the area, they're predicting the high school to be over capacity in a year or 2. Now, I reached out to the Caldwell City Council as well as Nampa City Council members to hear opinions on an ordinance like Middleton's. An idea like this has been talked about amongst Caldwell City Council before. Diana Register said she'd be open to bringing it back. Chuck Static said, again, in favor of bringing it back around, but he really wants to see the legislature pass those impact fees for schools to be able to collect.
Which is crazy because our partners at the Idaho Press looked into this about 2023 when they were first talking about building these new schools and how the population has increased by 20,000, yet school enrollment in Nampa has dropped.
Which
like
is Canyon County.
12%. Meanwhile, Valley View is seeing the opposite trend. Is still, because you said, because they're able to move or able to build, and so people can move there with kids apparently. Yeah,
and definitely around Valley View is where we're seeing a lot of those build out, more space to be able to do those builds. So they're really feeling the overcrowding with
He also mentioned something that they're looking to lawmakers to do this. Yeah. It's been since 1992 when they passed a law that said no impact fees for schools.
Yep.
And they've tried several times over the last few years to change that. The last one in 2023 never made it out of committee.
Well, maybe in a few years.
I'm sure a lot of people hope it's sooner. Thank you very much, Aspen. You know, the federal budget is nearly $7 trillion. So when President Trump was successful in clawing back about $9 billion of that last week, money that was already approved by Congress just a few months prior, it made a lot of news, but it certainly won't make a splash in our country's spending or deficit. $7 trillion is 7,000 billion, by the way. Just you got to take away 9 of those of the 7,000 billion. That's kind of the impact with what happened last week in the rescission bill. But it does make an impact on those who are counting on it, like for HIV prevention and other foreign aid programs. And here at home, too, on public media. We talked about this last week when we highlighted what a $1.1 billion cut to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting might do to local public radio stations in Idaho. Boise State Public Radio will see a 20% of its budget gone. That's what we were told. For ISU's station, Idaho State University station, it's 25% of their budget. And for a tribal station in Lapwai, it's 50% of their budget. So now those stations are in scramble mode to cover that lost funding. And on Friday, the day after the House gave the final approval to take that money back, and the day after we spoke with its general manager, Boise State Public Radio said they raised $150,000 in a donation drive. Tom Michael told us that did not set any records. They've raised that kind of money in one day in years past, like 10 years ago, but it's still a lot of money. And Michael says that number shows the community is listening and stepping up to help. And for anyone else who would like to step up to help, Boise State Public Radio is always open for a donation, and you can find out how at boisestatepublicradio.org. Okay, so is this what Idahoans voted for? Nearly 67% of us, more than 605,000, voted for President Donald Trump to have a second term. So I guess it seems so. But between the funding and health care cuts or even the immigration issue, what about the Republic part of this government, the representative part? Has it been representative of all Idahoans? A lack of town halls or opportunities to ask direct questions of Idaho's congressional delegation, it may seem like getting those answers can be difficult. But what if we went straight to them? Well, that's where we find Joe Paris this evening in D.C. to try to get their take on some of these issues. Joe?
Hi, Brian. Yes, good evening from Washington, D.C. We actually just got here. We just threw up the camera, so apologies for the appearance. But yeah, here we are right outside the United States Capitol. As Brian highlighted, we are going to be here all week speaking with each member of our congressional delegation. We also picked a great time to be here. Alex Adams, the former director of health and welfare, he is up for a spot in the Trump administration working on foster care, something that he helped revolutionize in the state of Idaho. We will be at his hearing tomorrow morning as he takes tough questions from the leaders here in Congress as he tries to earn a spot within the Trump administration. We also know there are some major players in town this week, like the director of the Idaho National Lab. We know that there's a lot of conversations going on in Idaho about nuclear power, renewed interest in American energy and self-sustainability. So we're going to work this week to figure out exactly what INL is doing on Capitol Hill. And we're also going to be working with our congressional delegation. We have 2 senators, 2 members of the House of Representatives. We're set up this week to ask them some of the most up-to-the-minute questions as we are here in D.C. Things happen very quickly. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask, feel free to text them into the 208-321-5614. You can use the hashtag the 208 so we can keep an eye out for those. Brian, I know that there's a lot of questions that we are hoping to get to this week. I know that especially the story you just touched on a few minutes ago with the rescission package passing a few days ago, we know that there's been a lot of criticism from Idaho's, I guess, home base in terms of, well, we understand the rescission package, but what about NPR? So we'll be getting into that. Also, still a lot of the big, beautiful bill, so-called, now the big, beautiful law signed in on July 4th. Brian, I think there's a lot of Idahoans that are finding out about provisions within the new bill that's now law, including gambling. There's one thing that I think Idahoans can keep an eye on there. And Brian, we will be here all week. So again, send us your questions. We look forward to getting some answers direct from the source here in DC.
Okay, so Joe, quick question before we let you go. How inside are you expecting to get this week with our delegation, or just inside the Beltway?
Oh, we're expecting to be, every step of the way for the most part. For example, we know that Senator Jim Risch, for example, he's on the Foreign Relations Committee, so he has some very highly classified meetings that for American safety reasons we aren't allowed to go into. But aside from that, we're going to be really step by step, you could say hand in hand with the congressional delegation here this week in D.C.
All right, we look forward to it. And again, you have a question that you want Joe to ask of our delegation, 208-321-5614. Send them our way. Thanks, Joe. It was a milestone we kind of missed last week. 93 years ago, saw the completion of an architectural wonder. The Owyhee Dam, just southwest of Adrian, Oregon, and just 21 miles west of Homedale as the crow flies, was the prototype for the even more famous Hoover Dam. Techniques and technologies used in southeastern Oregon would be used on a much grander scale on the Colorado River between Arizona and Nevada. They called the Owyhee River Oregon's Grand Canyon. But with the demand for water and getting it out of that gorge, it would become known as the Owyhee Project. And those hired on called it a job. Diversion work began in July of 1928, with the tunnel completed that October. Excavation on the Owyhee Project came next, and it would take crews a year and a half to get down to bedrock before the building of the dam could begin. Concrete work would happen in earnest, slowed only by severe cold in the winter of 30 and 31. But temperature would have a bigger role in the construction of the dam. Engineers would use a 28-foot section to test a new technology: water-cooled coils to keep the concrete from cracking. It worked, and that technique would later be used that year to construct the Hoover Dam. Another innovative idea incorporated into the project? A spillway built like the drain of a bathtub. They called it the Morning Glory Spillway, a ring gate capping a 760-foot tunnel to deliver water through the dam. However, it would only be used when the water reached a certain level, which has only happened 5 times in the last 3+ decades. The last time was last year. At completion, the Owyhee Dam reached 417 feet, the tallest at the time. And the day it was dedicated, 3,000 people showed up, almost twice the population of the nearest big city of Ontario at the time. And Oregon's Grand Canyon was now primed for irrigation. Well, construction began before the start of the Great Depression and cost a total of $6 million. Workers, though, were still happy to have a job, made $4 a day, minus the $1.50 for room and board. 417 feet high, the tallest in the world, as we mentioned, was surpassed by the Hoover Dam 3 years later at 726 feet. But the Owyhee laid the foundation for the Hoover, of course. The Owyhee Reservoir, by the way, can hold as much as 1.1 million acre-feet of water, but is usually at full capacity about 715,000 acre-feet. And for some perspective, 1.1 million acre-feet, Lucky Peak, the reservoir just up the road here, can hold 264,000 acre-feet, and Cascade Reservoir, 646,000, so it's much bigger. Despite construction completed in July of 1932, irrigation didn't begin until 1935. All of that water in the Owyhee Reservoir now feeds 172 miles of canals and brings water to more than 120,000 acres of farmland in eastern Oregon and southwestern Idaho. City of Boise has a long history of climate-friendly initiatives. Back at the turn of the millennium, Boise began trying to create a baseline of information that would help them take action against climate change. Starting point for a roadmap to carbon neutrality, which the city hopes to achieve by 2050. But reducing the carbon footprint actually began before that, or at least the city tried. Back in 1997, Boise launched the Yellow Bike Project, which was essentially just a bunch of old yellow bikes left unattended in downtown Boise that people could jump on and ride for free. As time went on, those bikes became harder and harder to find, but not necessarily for the reason you might think. Here's John Miller with another 208 Redial.
Any suggestions of where we might find a yellow bike?
I would have assumed that you could find them along there, but...
But those were purple bikes and white bikes and yellow bikes. It's a yellow bike, but it's not a yellow bike. Just like sometimes a news story becomes not a news story. See, then I start panicking and talking to anybody. How you doing? You guys seen any yellow bikes around? No, not yet. No. Okay.
I've seen 3 people ride by them this morning.
This morning, yeah.
We've been out here for an hour. I'm gonna lose my job.
No, you're not.
Hi. You aren't gonna believe this. We can't find a single yellow bike. We've been to City Hall, we've been to the Grove, we've been to Flying M, we've been down to the 8th Street area, 8th Street Marketplace, wherever. We even went and saw the yellow hot dog lady.
I saw one pass today.
And then most of the people that we've talked to are like hot dog people and stuff, said they've seen a couple. Where would we find one?
Well, I don't know. They're all over the place.
Just not this place or that place. Bye. Boy, are they not happy. Everybody's out yellow biking or something. Including Tanner Allen, finally. Yellow bike! Come on! You see, this might be what happens when an idea is too good for its own good. We've been looking all day for a yellow bike. So what do you think? Not the prettiest bike in the world?
No, but it works fine, so I can't complain.
A little small, a little slow, but it's a yellow bike. John Miller, Idaho's News Channel 7. Later on.
Well, everything about it was yellow, even the reflector. That didn't help. Okay, so obviously that program didn't last too long. It certainly didn't achieve the goal of getting more people to travel on 2 wheels. But city officials haven't given up on their dream of a green future. Back in 2015, the city launched the Green Bike Program. Color wasn't the only difference. You couldn't ride for free, and they had a solar-powered GPS tracker to help find them when they went missing. And like most things, all went according to plan. That is until the pandemic. The Green Bike Program became a collateral casualty of COVID-19, shutting down in September of 2020. Because remember, we didn't want to touch things, especially things that other people have touched. But like the T-800 from Terminator, the idea could not be killed. And in July of 2022, Valley Regional Transit partnered with the city to launch a new bike program called the Valley Bike. It was a bike share program using electric assist bikes rather than the traditional bikes that only worked by pedal power. That program, that didn't last long either, eventually shutting down in October of 2022. But if you've been downtown lately, you probably know what happened next. E-scooter companies like Lime and Bird, they began gaining traction within the last 5 years or so, and they even started offering e-bikes as well as scooters. So they're out there, which is why in 2023, Boise decided to partner with Lime Scooters to make them the sole provider of e-bikes and e-scooters in the City of Trees.
Winds have been very blustery today with all those storms and that activity we're seeing outside. Boise has seen a wind gust of 40 miles per hour. We can expect winds to continue for a couple more hours and then return again tomorrow. So make sure you're securing objects outside if they are loose at this time, because those winds will likely continue. This is a look at all of the activity happening outside right now. Central Mountain's getting a little bit more than we had originally anticipated, but most of that activity is happening in eastern Oregon, specifically Baker City. They have set a new record with how much rainfall they have seen today. So much so that just south of Baker City, there is a flash flood warning in place, specifically over the area where the Durkee fire burn scars are, because burn scars are particularly vulnerable to flash flooding, and they are getting quite a bit of rainfall right now. In Boise tomorrow, we're expecting to get to 86 degrees. We could see a shower or storm in the afternoon. Then we warm up through the rest of the week from then on.
Well, volunteers have made some headway on the feral cat population at the future soccer stadium. And with the winds this week, our air quality could suffer from regional wildfires. Here's Hunter Funk with 411.
A small group of volunteers, hoping to relocate a colony of feral cats living in the old horse race stadium, are making progress. The group announced today they've been able to trap 16 of those cats so far. They estimate between 50 and 60 cats currently live in the area. The volunteers are being told they have until about the end of September to trap and relocate the colony. Once the cats are caught, the group will temporarily relocate them to a farm in Eagle while they try to find permanent homes. The man who admitted to killing 4 University of Idaho students, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle, will be sentenced on Wednesday. Prosecutors and defense attorneys will present their recommended sentences for Brian Kohberger. He can then give a statement to the court where he could, but does not have to, explain his actions and personal circumstances. Then there will be victim impact statements. The judge then will hand down the sentence. Now, Kohberger took a plea deal earlier this month admitting to the crimes, which took the death penalty off the table. There are 2 active wildfires in the Payette National Forest. The Rush Fire and the Big Bear Fire were both sparked by lightning strikes on July 10th. The Big Bear Fire has burned over 7,000 acres just east of Arctic Point Lookout. The fire is currently burning west in steep slopes and thick timber. The Rush Fire started about a half a mile south from the Soldier Bar airstrip. It has now burned over 6,000 acres. There's currently no containment on either fire. Meanwhile, the mile marker 65 I-84 fire burning east of Boise is now contained and expected to be controlled later tonight. It started Friday afternoon and has burned more than 8,900 acres, and one outbuilding was destroyed. That's the 411 on the 208. I'm Hunter Funk.
All right, Tam in Caldwell would like to point out that it would take more than 10 years for school impact fees to accumulate in an amount to build a single school. Then impact fees do not pay for staff or operate it. Also, Caldwell School District enrollment is also shrunk like Nampa and other districts. Yes, we mentioned that as well. Just to be specific, though, Nampa dropped 14%, Caldwell dropped 12% over 2023. Did the Canyon County school bonds also pay for people and school programs? Fed cuts hit staffing and feeding kids, asked Tony. Yes, in fact, they paid for salaries, technology devices, transportation, enhancement programs, and classroom curriculum. So all of that was kind of included in that. Meanwhile, let's leave you with this. Susan, just so I'm clear, Lime put the squeeze on lemon bikes? That must have struck a sour note. Kind of like that pun. We'll see you tomorrow.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.